Good morning. This is Scott McGee with Nevada State Bank. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar entitled Tony Hsieh, Culture and Insights from Tony Hsieh, Culture and Community. Tony Hsieh is the CEO of online retailer Zappos.com. He's also the author of Delivering Happiness, which debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. In 1999, at age 24, Tony sold Link Exchange to Microsoft for $265 million. He then became an advisor and investor in Zappos.com, eventually becoming its CEO. He took that company from almost no sales to over $1 billion in gross sales. During today's webinar, Tony will discuss the company culture of Zappos.com and show you how to integrate delivering happiness principles into any business. He will also talk about the Downtown Project, a group committed to transforming downtown Las Vegas into the most community-focused large city in the world. I invite you to submit questions to Tony via Twitter today using the hashtag NSBWebinar. And now please welcome Tony Hsieh.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. So this presentation is actually in two parts. The first part, I usually go over a lot of the stuff that we do on the customer service and culture side of Zappos. And then the second half, I'm going to talk a bit more about our move to downtown Vegas and the Downtown Project. So some of it I'm going to speed through because we don't have the time to go through all of it in detail, but wanted to let everyone watching know that we'll actually make this presentation available so you can go through it in more detail. One thing I would definitely say, actually before getting into Zappos, I wanted to talk about the story of how, what led me to Zappos. And the story actually begins with pizza. This was in college. During my college years, I was actually running a pizza business on the ground floor of my dorm and with my college roommate, and we had about 300 or so students in the dorm. And this area was set aside on the ground floor where every year a different set of students could take over that area and do some sort of food business, and we decided to get into the pizza business. And this guy named Alfred, who later on became our CFO at Zappos, this was actually how we met. He would stop by every night and order a large pepperoni pizza from me, and then sometimes a couple hours later he would come back and order another large pepperoni pizza from me. And I had heard about Alfred's reputation for eating a lot. He had nicknames like Human Trash Compactor, Monster, and so on. So, and later on when we became friends, I actually personally witnessed this. There'd be 10 of us late night at a Chinese restaurant somewhere, and he would literally finish everyone's leftovers. So, not that surprising, he'd order a large pepperoni pizza, but then sometimes a few hours later, he'd order another large pepperoni pizza, and I thought maybe he had an all-nighter or skipped breakfast and so on. And I found out several years later, Alfred was actually taking the pizzas upstairs and selling them off by the slice to his roommates. And so that's actually how we became friends and why he later on became our CFO at Zappos. So that was the pizza business, and then after the pizza business, then it's the same roommate I was running the pizza business with, Sanjay. He and I got together and formed a company called Link Exchange, and this was during the early .com days back in 1996. We grew that to about 100 or so employees, and then ended up selling the company to Microsoft 2.5 years later. But what a lot of people don't know is the real reason why we ended up selling the company, and the real reason is because it just ended up not being a fun place to work at anymore, and the company culture went completely downhill. I remember when it was just 5 or 10 of us, it was a lot of fun. We were working around the clock, sleeping under our desks, had no idea what day of the week it was, but we were your typical .com startup, and it was a lot of fun as we were growing, and pretty exciting. And as we started growing, we hired friends and friends of friends, and there's this one friend of mine who was on this cross-country road trip from New York to San Francisco, where we were based out of, and we needed a little extra help for the weekend, and then that became a week and then 2 weeks, and he actually ended up joining the company full-time. So this whole concept of hiring friends and friends of friends worked really well for us until we got to about 100 or actually we eventually got to 100 people, but this concept of hiring friends and friends of friends worked really well for us until we got to 20 people, and then we ran into a major problem, and the problem was we basically ran out of friends. And so then we had to figure out how to hire people based on skill sets, resumes, interviewing, and stuff we'd never had really done before. We were fresh out of college, and I think learned a lot through trial and error, did a decent job in terms of hiring people with the right skill sets and experiences, but we just didn't know any better to pay attention to company culture. And by the time we got to 100 people, I myself dreaded getting out of bed in the morning to go to my own company, because not everyone we hired was great for the culture. And that was definitely a weird feeling to think that you kind of lost control of the culture of your own company. So that's actually what led us to sell the company to Microsoft. And shortly after sale, I left. Sanjay, the other co-founder, left. In fact, most of the early employees all left within a few months after the sale. As it turned out, it was during the early .com days. It worked out well financially, and so I was in the position of trying to think, what do I want to do with my life now? And that's when Alf and I got together and formed an investment fund called Venture Frogs, and we invested in about 20 or so different internet companies, and Zappos just happened to be one of them. But then over the course of a year, I realized that for me, investing was actually kind of boring. I felt like I was sitting on the sidelines, and I really missed being a part of building something. So within a year, I joined Zappos full-time. This was back in '99, and have been with Zappos ever since. It was about 2.5 years ago that Amazon acquired Zappos, but it's actually very different from most acquisitions that Amazon has done. In most of their other acquisitions, the plan is to integrate the company being acquired into the parent company, and then over time, the original company kind of loses its identity and joins the mothership. Whereas for us, we told them we'd only consider it if Zappos could remain independent, if we could continue to grow our culture, our way of doing business, and grow the Zappos brand separately from Amazon. And so from our point of view, it's basically as if we swapped out our board of directors with a new one, and have to report 2.5 years later. The extent of my interaction with Amazon is basically flying up to Seattle once a quarter for the equivalent of a board meeting. So our whole philosophy at Zappos is really to spend most of the money we would have normally spent on paid advertiser and paid marketing, and rather invest in that, invest into customer service and the customer experience, and then let our customers do the marketing for us through word of mouth. And our hope is that 10 years from now, people won't even realize we started out selling shoes online. And in fact, today we sell clothing and beauty products, housewares, kitchenware. And we've grown from no sales in '99 to, in 2008 was the first year we hit $1 billion in gross merchandise sales. Now we're doing well over $2 billion a year in gross sales. And the number one driver of all that growth has been through repeat customers and word of mouth. And these are some of the questions we ask ourselves when we really think about how do we wow our customers, not just in terms of when they call us, but also in the free shipping both ways, and our 365-day return policy, and so on. And really the goal is to just build the Zappos brand to be about the very best customer service and customer experience. And we've even had customers email us and ask us if we would please start an airline or run the IRS. And those are things that we're not planning on doing this year, but 20 years from now, there could be a Zappos Airlines that's just about delivering the very best customer service and customer experience. So for all this focus on customer service, the number one priority of the company is actually not customer service. Our number one priority is company culture. And our whole belief is that if we get the culture right, then most of the other stuff like delivering great customer service or building a long-term enduring brand or business will just be a natural byproduct of that. And so we do that in the hiring process, and actually there's a lot of different areas where we really try to embed this culture philosophy. And part of the reason for that is I definitely don't want to repeat the same mistake that I'd made at my previous company. But the other reason for that is, as it turns out, and this was kind of coincidental, that it actually turns out to be actually a good business strategy if you're trying to build a business for the long term. And so, for example, on the hiring side, we actually do 2 sets of interviews. The hiring manager and his or her team will interview for the standard stuff like fit within the team, relevant experience, technical ability, and so on. But then our HR department does a separate set of interviews purely for culture fit, and they have to pass both in order to be hired. So we've passed on a lot of smart, talented people that we know they can make an immediate impact on our top or bottom line, but if they're not good for our culture, we won't hire them for that reason alone. And the reverse is true too. Even if someone's doing their specific job function perfectly fine, even if they're a superstar in their specific job function, if they're bad for our culture, we'll fire them for that reason alone. So in terms of how we've been thinking of our brand for the last several years, we have something we internally refer to as the 3 C's: clothing, customer service, and company culture. And this is kind of the life cycle of the customer. So customers that have no idea what Zappos is about, have never heard of us, we want them to know we've got a great selection of clothing and footwear and other product categories. And once they know about that, then we want them to know that we're all about delivering the very best customer service. And that's not something we tell them so much as something they experience when they call us, or experience how easy it is to do the free shipping both ways, or they get that surprise upgrade to overnight shipping. And once they know about that, then we want them to know about our company cultures, because that's really the platform that makes everything possible. So we've had customers tell us when they get that perfect outfit or perfect pair of shoes, that Zappos is happiness in a box. So whether it's the happiness that customers feel from getting that perfect outfit or perfect pair of shoes, or the happiness that customers feel from experiencing great customer service, or the happiness that employees feel that when they're part of a culture where the values of the company match their own personal values, the thing that we realized a few years ago, that ties all of these 3 C's together is that Zappos is really just about delivering happiness, whether it's to customers or employees, and we try to apply that same philosophy to our vendor partners as well. And so I'm going to actually speed through this next section a little bit, but really want to summarize the 2 main points that I usually talk about. And if you haven't read these 2 books, Good to Great and Tribal Leadership, would highly recommend reading them. I wish they had existed prior to Zappos being founded, because it would have saved us a lot of trial and error. But basically, the authors researched and looked at what separated the great companies in terms of long-term financial performance from just the good ones or mediocre ones. And they were actually kind of surprised by their findings. They found that the great companies had 2 important ingredients that the good ones or mediocre ones generally did not have. And the first ingredient was that the great companies all had strong cultures. And for us, we formalized the definition of our culture into 10 core values. And I'll make this presentation available, or you can just Google Zappos core values. And we actually have interview questions for each and every one of these core values. And the one that probably trips us up the most during the hiring process is the last one, be humble, because there's a lot of smart, talented people out there that are also egotistical. And for us, it's not even a question. We just won't hire them. But at a lot of other companies, the conversation might be, well, this person is going to add a lot of value, and even though he might be kind of annoying or rub people the wrong way sometimes, we should hire him because he's going to add a lot of value to the company. And that one hire may or may not bring the company culture downhill, but I think if you keep making compromises like that over and over and over again, that's why most large companies don't have great company cultures. And so for us, we wanted to make sure that not only does the company culture not go downhill as we grow, but actually scales and get stronger and stronger as we grow. And so when you take a tour of our offices, we're right now located in Henderson, which is a suburb of Las Vegas. We're right next to the airport, and would definitely recommend you come for a tour. You can just go to tours.zappos.com, and we offer tours Monday through Thursdays, and each day, right now, there's a couple hundred people going through tours, and you can it's a chance to see our culture in action. And we're super transparent. After the tour takes an hour, we'll pick you up from the airport in a Zappos shuttle, drop you off at your hotel afterwards. And we also offer this for prospective job candidates, to reporters, and then afterwards we'll even encourage people to go around and talk to whoever they feel like. And one of the responses we get, because you'll see that our environment is definitely not your typical corporate environment, one of the responses we get sometimes is, with all the decorations on, okay, happy for you, Zappos, you made the Fortune Best Companies to Work For list 3 years in a row, and you've got this strong culture, but the stuff you're talking about would never work at my company. So how is this relevant to me or my company? And what I found really interesting about the research from those books, Good to Great and Tribal Leadership, was that they found it actually doesn't matter what your values are. What matters is that you have them, and the power comes from the alignment you get from having the entire organization aligned around whatever values are right for you. And so our message is not that other companies should adopt the Zappos core values or the Zappos culture, because in most cases that would actually probably not be the right decision. But our message in the book and in the presentations and when we talk to people is that you should have values that you actually commit to. And by committing to, meaning that you're actually willing to hire and fire based on. So this presentation, there's some other stories that you can read later on. I'll make this presentation available, but one of the other reactions we get sometimes is, oh, you're an internet company, so special rules apply to you. And so there's stories in there like from the Atlanta refrigeration company, that they do refrigeration repairs out in the field. And so in some ways you can't think of a more opposite company or industry than Zappos. And they, through our Zappos Insights program, which is its own separate website and entity, if you go to zapposinsights.com, they focus on company culture, figuring out their values, and then reported back that in a relatively short period of time, not only are their customers happier and their employees happier, but their revenues and profits are up in a down economy doing refrigeration repairs. So for us, it's been pretty rewarding and exciting to see this whole concept of happiness as a business model being applied and working in other industries and companies. So going back to the research from these two books, they said, in their research they found there were two important ingredients that separated the great companies in terms of long-term financial performance from just the good ones. The first was the great companies all had strong cultures. The second ingredient I actually found really counterintuitive. The second ingredient they found was that the great companies all had a vision that had a higher purpose beyond just money or profits or being number one in market or beating the competition. And the irony of that is by actually having a higher purpose that wasn't about profits, it actually enabled these companies to generate significantly more profits than their peers. And so I like to say chase the vision, not the money, and then it's always fun quoting a movie, which I think lasted a week in the movie theater, where he said, don't chase the paper, chase the dream. But really this whole idea of a higher purpose in the company, like it seems altruistic, but it's actually a good business strategy. And so when I talk to entrepreneurs, my advice to them is thinking about what would you be so passionate about doing that you'd be happy doing it for 10 years, even if you didn't make any money. You know, try not to make money your primary motivator, because if you actually figure that out, it'll actually greatly increase your chances of making more money. And if you have employees that report to you, think about what's the larger vision and greater purpose in their work beyond just money or profits or being number one in the market. There's a lot of books and consultants that talk about motivating employees, and you can motivate them through recognition or incentives and so on. And those work up to a certain extent, but what we've discovered over the years at Zappos is that there's a huge difference between motivation and inspiration. And if you can inspire your employees through a vision that has a higher purpose beyond just money or profits or being number one in market or beating the competition, if you can inspire your employees by having values, not just stated values, but actually practice values that you're willing to hire and fire based on that match their own personal values, then you can accomplish so much more, and you actually don't really need to worry about the motivation part of it. It just kind of takes care of itself, and employees are so much more engaged and productive and creative and so on if you can really tap into that inspirational part of it. So this is the evolution of our brand at Zappos. Those books didn't exist, and a lot of the stuff was stuff we stumbled into over the years. In '99 it was, let's just sell a lot of shoes, let's just be the market leader. And then 2003 was when we decided, we all sat around one day and asked ourselves, what do we want to be when we grow up? And that's when we decided to build the Zappos brand to be about the very best customer service and customer experience. And a funny thing happened when we decided on that and communicated it with our employees. We found that employees were suddenly a lot more passionate and excited about the company. And when customers called, they could sense that the person on the other end of the phone truly wanted to deliver great service and wasn't there just for a paycheck. And when vendors came and visited us, not only did they visit us more frequently, but they stayed longer. And so all of these things had this multiplicative snowball effect over the years. And then you can see how in 2005 was when we rolled out our core values and really focused on company culture. And then 2009 was when we kind of took a step back and realized customer service is about making customers happy. Company culture is about making employees happy, so let's just simplify the vision and have it be just about delivering happiness. And so one of the things we get asked sometimes is, okay, you've got these 3 C's, clothing, customer service, company culture, that's all tied into delivering happiness. And in the past, one of the questions we used to get was, well, what's next? What's after happiness? And one of my favorite quotes is from, I think it's a founder or CEO of one of the big ad agencies, was that a great brand is a story that never stops unfolding. And so a little over a year ago, we announced actually that we're moving into Las Vegas City Hall, the old City Hall. The city literally just moved out of this City Hall a few months ago. They're in their new location now. And for the past, I'd say 6 or 7 years, we've actually been looking for a place in all of the Las Vegas Valley, including the suburbs, to build a new campus to house everyone under one roof, because culture for us is so important. And right now we're spread amongst 3 different buildings in Henderson, and so a lot of the people that are in the building at the top of the hill, they might as well be in Siberia. You never see them, and we're always trying to think of ways of how do we get employees to collide with each other and run into each other more often, have these serendipitous encounters and these conversations. And so when the City Hall opportunity became available, we were really excited about it. It's actually being designed to house over 2,000 employees, and there's land to expand upon. And so then we started touring and looking at these other great corporate campuses, like Nike has a great campus, Google and Apple. And I remember when we went to the Nike campus, there was a pub in one of the buildings, and we thought to ourselves, well, we need one of those. And then it turns out that actually City Hall has jail cells in it, and so we're actually talking to someone about partnering to turn that into a speakeasy bar and maybe call it just bars or something like that. And then we actually surveyed our employees and asked them, what are the different amenities that you want in your dream campus, in our dream campus? And definitely the pub or bar idea. Nike has this running track that went around, so people said they wanted a gym, and there were all sorts of, we had a list of probably 100 or 200 suggestions from our employees. But the number one request we got from our employees was actually doggy daycare. More than human daycare, actually. But then as we started thinking about it more, we realized that those campuses that we looked at, Nike, Google, Apple, they were great for their employees, but they're actually very insular, and they don't really integrate or contribute to the community around them. And so we started thinking about, what if we actually turn the idea inside out? What if we actually took an approach where our campus was more like NYU, where the city blends in with the campus and the company, and you don't really know where one begins and the other ends. And what if instead of just investing in the campus and ourselves, we invest in the community and the ecosystem? In the long run, that'll actually help us attract and retain more employees. And completely coincidentally, a couple blocks away from the City Hall location is this area of downtown Vegas that most tourists don't know about, called Fremont East. And a bunch of Zappos employees, myself included, actually had already started hanging out there. And if you go into any of these bars or coffee shops, you'd have no idea you were in Vegas. And if anything, it's almost like the anti-strip in terms of what most people think of downtown Vegas. Most people either think of the Strip, or if they even know downtown, it's the old casinos and so on. You go into these bars, there's no gaming. And so there's some pictures of some of the various places in this area called Fremont East. And it's actually, I grew up in San Francisco, and it's actually really weird. It's actually the most community-focused place I've ever lived, even though I grew up in San Francisco. But I've never been to a place where the bar owners hang out in each other's bars just to support the community. And over a period of time, this is kind of like the equivalent of our Central Perk in the TV show Friends, but basically anywhere you go into, it feels like Cheers once you've lived there or just hung out there for a little while. And so we started thinking in terms of our brand at Zappos, evolving from just the 3 C's, clothing, customer service, and company culture, to adding a 4th C, with the 4th C being community, and have that be part of our identity and what we stand for and what we want to contribute to. So separately from Zappos, we formed a separate company called Downtown Project that's privately funded, and it has a $350 million budget to invest in small businesses, tech startups, education, arts, residential, and so on. And there's a few different goals, and one of the reasons why we wanted to have this separate from Zappos is so that we didn't have to answer to outside investors, and we could really focus on doing what we believe are the right things to do for the neighborhood and community for the long term. So there's a few different goals. One is to have everything you need to live, work, play within walking distance. So investing in, for example, coffee shops and restaurants and bars and so on. Another is to make downtown Vegas the most community-focused large city in the world, in probably the place you would least expect it. Another is to make it the co-working capital and co-learning capital of the world. And co-working is this concept that started out in San Francisco 7 or 8 years ago, where tech companies worked side by side, the small tech startups, but in the same physical space. And then they would overhear conversations and be able to help each other out. And what they learned through that process is by having companies in close physical proximity to each other, that a lot of innovation and partnerships would actually come from that. And so now, since that first experiment from 7 or 8 years ago, co-working now has spread all over the world. There's literally thousands and thousands of co-working spaces around the world, and not just in tech, but also in fashion and photography and culinary, and basically you can imagine anything you can build a community around, there's an opportunity to build a co-working space for. So we want to make downtown Vegas the co-working capital of the world and think of it as almost like a community of communities where people learn just by being in close proximity to each other. And so really the whole strategy with Downtown Project is rather than focus on, and what makes us different from almost all real estate developers that at least we've come across, is rather than focus on the short-term ROI and cash flow needs of different development projects, we have this whole concept and philosophy of focusing on long-term ROC, return on community. And that's kind of the lens and filter through which we make all our different investments. And so just like at Zappos, when we hire people, we do 2 sets of interviews. One of the sets of interviews is for culture. On the investment side, we have this additional kind of community requirement. So even if there's this great investment opportunity that can make us a lot of money, if it's not good for the community, then it's not something that we're interested in investing in. And so really the big bet is we want to focus on 3 things: accelerating community, accelerating learning, and accelerating serendipity, and this idea of collisions and people running into each other. And then, and it's actually not even really that big a bet because this has all been backed by research that's been done. But by focusing on these 3 things, that's going to lead to not only happier employees and a happier community, but innovation and productivity gains. So why do this? One is I live here. I moved to downtown. I've lived in Vegas for 8.5 years now, but moved to downtown a little over a year ago. It's good for Zappos in the long run. It's ultimately going to help us attract and retain more employees. In the short run, it's actually, in some cases, going to be a little painful for Zappos because we've actually funded, because we're focusing on the ecosystem, we've actually already had Zappos employees leave Zappos to start startups that we then fund through the Downtown Project. And that's something, that may seem counterintuitive, but ultimately we're investing in the ecosystem. We want to help make this a place where other tech companies want to move to as well. And we've actually had about 10 tech companies move to downtown Vegas from other states over the last few months because of this whole ecosystem we're really focusing on. It's good for the city, and then we want to open source and share what works and doesn't work on the Downtown Project website, and hopefully help inspire other cities to really focus on their communities and reinventing and revitalizing themselves. So quick breakdown of how the $350 million budget is being spent. $50 million is being invested into small businesses to help build a sense of neighborhood and community. So the idea is we want to invest in 100 to 200 small businesses. This is actually the post-it, this is actually my wall in my apartment, and we actually have tours go through my apartment when we give an overview of Downtown Project, which is a separate tour from the tours we give for Zappos. And we're actually very anti-top-down master planning, which is how a lot of city revitalization projects work. And instead, we actually just, during the tours, we ask people, what do you want in your dream neighborhood? And they'll say things like they want a doggy daycare or a bakery or so on. And then if it's not already on the wall, then we encourage them to actually add that idea to the wall. The other interesting thing that comes through when people go on these tours is that every once in a while we'll get someone who's, for example, their lifelong dream is to retire 10 years from now and start a cupcake bakery. And we tell them, well, rather than retire 10 years from now, why don't we talk about it now, and maybe we can actually make this part of the neighborhood that we're trying to build together. And we have a few different criteria for small businesses that we want to invest in. One is you need to be super passionate about it, and it needs to be something that you want to do because of the passion and something that you'd be happy doing for 10 years or for the rest of your life. Number 2, it needs to be good for the community. It needs to be self-sustainable. We need confidence in your ability to execute. And then also we're interested in investing in businesses that are either unique or best in whatever category they're in, or the first in something. And so we've gotten a lot of proposals from people that have, they've seen this franchise concept work in 5 or 6 other cities, and they want to bring that to downtown Vegas. And that's something that, from Downtown Project's perspective, we're not actually that interested in. We want things that are owner operated and run and really can be the best at whatever they're interested in. And then we also want businesses that are interesting or story-worthy in some way. We also have a $50 million budget set aside for investing in tech startup companies. And as I mentioned earlier, we've had about 10 tech startup companies relocate from other states to downtown Vegas. And this has actually been the fastest growing part of all the different things that we've been doing. This is the tech library that was actually built by volunteers. It's on the second floor of that coffee shop there, and if you go there Thursday night, 7 p.m. till midnight, the place, there's 100 usually plus people from the tech startup world there, which is really surprising because at the beginning of last year, the tech startup community was non-existent in Vegas, anywhere. And a lot of us, including us at Zappos, thought, oh, we're basically the only tech company here, and so we need to import all these other tech companies to downtown Vegas. And then once this was built and they started having these regular meetings, they're called Tech Jellies, on Thursday nights, what people discovered was actually there's a lot of tech companies around. We just never had a place to meet and gather. And so it's been really neat seeing the community come together and put together things like the Tech Library and their Startup Weekend competitions and all sorts of different events that they've done. And then now that's actually been what's attracting these other companies from other states to move here. One of the companies that moved here is this company called Remotive. They do iPhone-powered robots. And it's pretty cool. So basically, the device on the bottom is like $100, $150 device, and you put an iPhone on top of it, which an iPhone already has GPS and camera and accelerometer and so on. And then you use another iPhone to basically control that robot remotely, and it could even be from another city. So the grandfather in New York can be at his grandson's birthday party in Seattle and interacting with all the different people. And they were 3 people, 7 or 8 months ago, 3 people in Seattle. They were about to move to Silicon Valley, the Bay Area, and then we recruited them to downtown Vegas, and they're now at 15, 16 people, growing rapidly. And they've actually gotten additional funding beyond just us from major venture capitalists. And so it's just pretty exciting to see in such a short period of time. And this is just one of many companies that have moved here, and now they're actually recruiting not only other tech people to join Remotive, this company, but encouraging other tech companies from other states that are in their network to move to downtown Vegas as well. So we've seen this really snowball at a rapid rate. And part of the reason that they want to move here, that we found that there's 2 reasons why other tech companies want to move here instead of Silicon Valley or other places. One is because of the community focus. They found that downtown Vegas is a lot more missionary and less mercenary compared to Silicon Valley. And there's this real sense of camaraderie and startups wanting to help each other. And then the other reason is because it's basically the opportunity to think of the city as a startup and help shape our future. And how many times in a lifetime do you have an opportunity to help shape the future of a major city? So that's pretty exciting for them. We also partnered with Venture for America, which is like Teach for America, but instead of for kids that are graduating from college going into education, these are kids that want to, after graduating from college, become entrepreneurs, and we're their major launch partner. And they're launching in a number of cities, but definitely Las Vegas is their biggest city that they're doing a push on and taking on different projects. And Teach for America, between Zappos and Downtown Project, we're donating $1.5 million a year to them. And I didn't know much about Teach for America except for the name a little over a year ago, but it's pretty interesting. As part of our investment in, not only are they doing what they're already doing to help improve education in the downtown area, but part of the partnership is to relocate their Vegas headquarters to downtown Vegas and to bring 1,000 Teach for America core members, alumni, to live downtown. And what I learned over the past year is that 12% of all Ivy League seniors apply for Teach for America and then they accept only about 25% of those. And so we're getting the best and the brightest and young, energetic, civic-minded people with a lot of energy, and bringing all of that energy downtown in addition to everything else that we're doing. So that's pretty exciting. We took over First Friday, which is this arts and music festival that was in danger of actually just going away because it wasn't able to support itself, and are partnering with the founders of Burning Man actually to bring Burning Man art downtown. We actually had our first urban burn back in March. It was a burning woman, and we drew actually 25,000 people. And so this has been this great community event. And so part of what we're trying to do in downtown Vegas in general is just have this cadence of all these different events that happen on a regular basis. So there's First Friday that happens on the first Friday of every month. And then there's things like Trivia Night that happen on every other Tuesday. And then the Tech Jellies happen every Thursday. And then there's an event called Inspire that happens on the third Tuesday of every month, where over 100 people show up and people give 5-minute talks about what inspires them. And so there's all these different events that are really gathering momentum and really bringing the community together on a regular basis. And this is an example of some of the art that we're looking at bringing. This is, I think, 40 or 50 feet tall, originally out in, and one of the really interesting things about Burning Man, which is actually coming up this coming weekend, over Labor Day weekend, is that the art there is on a grand scale. This is 40 or 50 feet tall, but they also try to incorporate into all their art pieces some form of community or collaboration. One of the pieces that we looked at was this Rubiks Cube. That was a giant Rubiks Cube that's beautiful at night, and there were like 3 or 4 stations around, and the only way to solve it was for the different people to, on different ends, to kind of coordinate and cooperate with each other. So those are things that we think would be pretty interesting to make downtown Vegas more walkable and connect the city. This is a book would highly recommend reading called Triumph of the City by Ed Glazer. He is a Harvard economics professor that studied different cities from different time periods, including New York, Detroit, Rome, and looked at why some thrived and some didn't. And he was actually found some pretty interesting things. One of the things he found was that every time the size of a city doubles, productivity or innovation per resident increases by 15%. But when companies get bigger, actually productivity per employee tends to go down. So from Zappos' perspective, part of our goal and the reason why this is interesting is because we want to try to avoid that same fate. And how do we actually create this interesting hybrid between company and community and city, and so that it becomes this virtuous win-win cycle for all the parties involved. And so we're really focused on accelerating learning, accelerating innovation. A lot of it is about maximizing the number of serendipitous interactions amongst people in the community. And research has shown that actually most innovation happens from taking something outside your industry and then applying it to your own. Most innovation actually doesn't come from within your company or within, even within your industry. And so we're focusing on this idea of how do we get as many collisions as possible happening within a community. And the other interesting research from the book has been that you need a residential density of at least 100 residents per acre, combined with street level activity for them to collide on, so all those post-it notes. And then the last one is probably the toughest to just kind of create from out of nowhere, is kind of this culture of sharing and collaboration and openness and so on, which we already have at Zappos, and coincidentally already existed and still exists today in the Fremont East area. So that was just one of those great coincidences that was almost too good to be true when we found out the City Hall opportunity was available. And by bringing Zappos and the existing culture in Fremont East together, we can really, I think, accelerate the whole process. And most city revitalization projects take 15 to 20 years. I think we can actually accomplish stuff a lot faster, and we're actually setting as a goal to completely help transform the area in 5 years. And so these are all the different groups colliding. We have City Hall is being built for 2,000 Zappos employees. We have the 1,000 Teach for America Core Members alumni. There's the Venture for America, community tech startups, small businesses, and so on. And really the big bet is get them close together, get them interacting with each other, and statistically the magic will just happen on its own. And whether it's from co-working or at Zappos, we've spent the last 13 plus years at Zappos really focusing a lot on company culture. And we've done things that may seem kind of counterintuitive. So for example, right now in Henderson, we're spread amongst 3 different buildings, and in the building that I happen to have my desk in, the parking lot is in the back, and with the previous tenants, they actually just opened up all the doors, and so employees could go from the back parking lot into the back door, and that was the most convenient thing. Well, we actually locked all the doors, and we forced everyone to walk around the building to go in through the front door. And even though it's more inconvenient, the reason why we think that's important is because it gets those serendipitous interactions to happen. It gets employees that work in different departments or at different levels to run into each other and to collide with each other. And then we've also done stuff in terms of actually looking at how do we pack employees closer and closer together. So in the United States, if you take the total number of square feet of office space divided by the total number of employees, you come out to about 200 or 300 square feet per employee. Well, at our current offices in Henderson, we're at about 120 square feet per employee. And with our new city hall plans, we're actually targeting to be below 100 square feet per employee. And it may seem like not a huge difference to go from 120 to sub 100, but one of the interesting things that we've learned from the research, and they've actually researched this in office environments, is that when you sit, if you move someone and they sit twice as far away from you, you don't see them half as often. You see them half as often squared. So you see them a quarter as often, and it's kind of like the inverse gravity law of how gravity works. And so there's huge gains when you get people packed more and more closely together. And we found that the same thing actually happens in cities. And so for us, for all the focus that we have on culture and stuff we've experimented with at Zappos over the past 13 years, we've realized that culture is to a company as community is to a city. It's the same concept, but just at a different scale. And it's things like values and innovation and accelerating serendipity and getting people to participate in this whole idea of sharing and openness and collaboration. And the other thing that we're really focusing on is really one of our beliefs is that actually not all jobs are created equal. You know, a lot of governments especially seem to focus on, oh, we created these 1,000 jobs or we relocated 1,000 jobs from another place to our city or our state and so on. And what we're really focused on is actually jobs with upward mobility. Because if it's 1,000 jobs where those 1,000 employees are going to be doing the exact same thing 10 years down the line, that's actually not that interesting for us. And at Zappos, we have this whole concept called a pipeline where we want employees to continually have opportunities to grow. And you might start out entry level as a call center rep, but over a period of 6 or 7 years, you have the opportunity to get all the training and mentorship and so on to become a senior leader within the company. And we want to see that same thing happen on the community and city level. And that's why we're so focused on attracting entrepreneurs and small businesses, startups, and the creative class in general, and then also making downtown Vegas a place of learning where we help people get smarter and learn all these different things. This is actually the building I live in, and it's our actually secret weapon. It's been our best recruiting tool because we have, there's about 275 units in here. This was built in, I think, 2007, right before the whole real estate crash. And I think it was built for $135 million. And then originally as condos, less than 10% sold. And then Starwood came and bought it after the crash for $35 million and turned them all into apartments. And collectively, our group between Zappos and Downtown Project and the tech companies and small businesses that we recruited, we actually are renting out about a third of the units in this building. And so it's become almost this little community, even just within the building, which has been pretty cool. And then out of those, about 40 bedrooms we've set up as, we call them crash pads, but basically furnished apartments that we set up as free hotel rooms. And we set them up and invite people that we think would be interested, that we're interested in recruiting or that we want to just come and check out what's going on with downtown. And so our whole pitch to people has been, hey, we've got these free furnished apartments. Next time you're in Vegas, come for a few days or even work remotely for a week. We've had people work remotely for as long as a month and just stay here. And what ends up happening is they end up essentially being tricked into experiencing the local coffee shop and the local bars and see a completely different side of Vegas, and that's actually been our best recruiting tool. And and a really surprising unintended side effect happened that wasn't planned at all from that, and now we're constantly sold out of these rooms because we have 40 of them, and so we're getting these 40, and we're trying to actually find more spaces for our visitors. But even at 40 visitors a week, what's been happening is these visitors not only get to experience the downtown community, but they end up meeting each other as well. And so there's these conferences like TED or Summit Series or South by Southwest. TED is this great annual conference where there's 2 reasons to go. Half the value of going to the TED conference is because during I think it's a 4-day event, during those 4 days, people are giving these 20-minute, half-hour talks about how they're on interesting stuff and of how they're changing the world, whether it's on the tech side, education side, design, and so on. The other value of going to TED is that these people end up meeting each other. No matter who you bump into, they're doing something interesting to help change the world. And the unintended side effect of what we've been doing downtown is TED is this conference that happens once a year, and it's a great event. And downtown is now becoming almost like this mini TED conference that is happening every single week. And so not only do these people meet each other, what we found is they also start coming back every 2 or 3 months down or so, partly out of curiosity to see what else is developed in the downtown project and what's physically developed in terms of the different projects we're working on, but partly because they also then get to meet these interesting people, and it's different people every time that happen to also be colliding and visiting downtown Vegas. And so what we've started doing is asking a lot of these people visiting to just give a 20-minute or sometimes up to an hour talk about whatever they're passionate about, just contributing something to the community. So we started the speaker series, and actually on the corner of Fremont and Las Vegas, we're now building a speakers theater. That'll be a place for the community and for visitors to come, and kind of just like at TED, no matter when you pop in, someone's giving an interesting talk about something. And so we had someone come in and give a talk about he was good at memorizing and speed reading, so he taught us how to do that. And there was someone else that gave a talk, and he had studied entrepreneurs and came out with a book called Heart, Smarts, Guts, and Luck. And basically, those were the 4 categories in his research when he looked at different entrepreneurs and found that each entrepreneur that he talked to fell into one of those 4 categories as their dominant trait, as to what guided them as they grew their businesses. And what he found was that it actually didn't matter which one of those 4 things, whether it was hearts, guts, luck, or smarts, it didn't matter which one of those 4 things was your dominant trait. What was most predictive of how well you did from an entrepreneurial or business perspective was how self-aware you were of which category you fell into, and then he broke that down. And so just really interesting talks like that. And so these are really the 3 things that by really focusing on, that falls more into the learning category, but then people also end up meeting each other. And so by accelerating community and serendipity, community and the culture of downtown and learning, what we want people to walk away with, whether they're visiting downtown Vegas or living in downtown Vegas, what we want the brand of downtown Vegas to become is we want people to say, downtown Vegas will make you smarter. And that's probably the most counterintuitive thing you would ever expect to hear about Vegas, but it goes back to really thinking of downtown as the anti-strip, a place for community and learning and serendipity. And if we can do it in downtown Vegas, in the place where people least expect it, and share what works and doesn't work, then we can hopefully help inspire other cities. And this whole idea of inspiration has been kind of a common theme, whether it's through Zappos or Delivering Happiness, which is a separate company, or our downtown project. And we actually just passed the threshold in human history where 50% of all humans now live in cities. And this just happened in the past couple of years. And within our lifetime, this 50% number is actually going to become 75%. So basically, if we can make downtown Vegas the most community-focused large city in the world and have these innovation productivity gains, inspire other cities to do that. If you do that, if you fix the cities, then you kind of fix the world. And so that's kind of, that's why the things that we're focusing on in downtown Vegas is so exciting and meaningful and impactful, because it goes much more beyond Vegas. And Vegas really, I guess, reminds me of the story of the 4-minute mile. You know, for the longest time, people thought it was impossible to run a mile in 4 minutes. And then finally someone did it. And then within a year of that guy doing it, then other people broke the 4-minute mile. And it wasn't like during that year, nutrition was suddenly better on Earth. It was just, people just believed it was possible. And so we want downtown Vegas to help change what people believe is possible. And so that's what Downtown Project and Zappos is all focused on. And that's it and I think we have time for Q&A, right?
Yes, thank you very much, Tony. That was very inspiring. I appreciate your time today. And yeah, let's take a couple of questions from our Twitter guests online. This is from Twitter user Vegas Bike Racing. What is your personal definition of happiness for your own life?
Sorry, what was the first part of bike racing? Oh, Vegas. Personal
bike
definition racing. Of, so there's normally so I had to cut out certain parts of this presentation, but by the way, let me put up this email address, ceo@zappos.com, for anyone that wants a copy of this presentation. But so from the, I've actually read up a lot on the research that's been done on the science of happiness. And so I've actually, one framework for happiness is that happiness is really just about 4 things. It's about perceived control, perceived progress, connectedness, meaning the number and depth of your relationships, and then being part of something bigger than yourself that has meaning to you. And it's always interesting because that's what has come from the science part of it, but then realizing just as you go through life, if you look through things through that lens, that actually is a pretty good framework for just making sure that whatever you're doing, you know, you have those 4 things. So I don't know if that's a direct answer or if that completely answers what they're looking for, but I would say for me, I've definitely found that those 4 things matter.
Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you, Tony. And this is from Twitter user The Spark. What were some of your initial hurdles that you had when starting your first business?
I think the initial hurdles is just trying to figure out what business you're in. The business that Zappos is in today is completely different from the original idea, and to just always be open to seeing what works and doesn't work. Jim Collins, who I talked about, wrote the book Good to Great, actually has this new book out I would highly recommend as well, called Great by Choice. And there's this whole concept he has in there of throwing bullets and cannonballs. And basically you want to shoot a lot of bullets, and then 90% of them will miss, but the ones that hit, those are the ones that you want to then really invest in the business behind. And so don't get too stuck on, before the business starts, oh, this is what's going to work, but experiment a lot and do the experiments as cheaply as possible, and then really put your resources behind that. And so I would say that's part of it. And then the other part I would say is just, it's so, and this is still hard for us even today, 13 years later, because there's always so much to do, there's always the temptation to hire as fast as possible, and then when you need to fire someone, it's never fun firing someone, so you kind of drag your feet. And so people tend to, including us, tend to hire quickly and fire slowly, when really it should be the other way around.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Tony. From Charlie, when you talk about hiring for fit, what traits are you looking for?
Yeah, so if you email me for the presentation or just do a Google search for Zappos core values, those are the traits we're looking for. We have interview questions for each and every one of those core values. And one thing actually that makes Zappos a little different from a lot of other companies is a lot of other companies talk about work-life separation or work-life balance. And for us, we really focus a lot more on work-life integration. And so you should be, a lot of, especially bigger corporations, you're a different person on Monday when you show up to the office than you are on weekends hanging out with your friends. And we really, at the end of the day, it's just life, and we want you to feel comfortable just being yourself in the office and form true friendships, not just coworker relationships.
And to that point, from Twitter user Coupons for Humanity, what makes someone bad, I guess, for your business culture? What would be somebody that would be maybe not good for the culture?
Yeah, I think the one that comes up the most frequently is basically just people that are arrogant, because that runs counter to our core value of being humble, and that's probably the one that shows up the most often. And for example, no matter what position you're in, because we're so customer focused based, before you start your actual job, you actually go through 4 weeks of customer service training, where in part of those 4 weeks you're actually on the phone for 2 weeks taking real calls from real customers. And occasionally we have senior people come through that say, oh, I don't actually have to do that, do I? Or they show up later, don't take it seriously, and then we end up actually just, if they can't make it past those 4 weeks, even though that's not the actual job they were hired for, we actually do end up firing people during those 4 weeks, because we see that they can give great lip service to customer service, but their actions don't really reflect that they care about it.
So the genuine and sincerity is really what you're looking for, and the humbleness.
Definitely.
From all positions, though.
Yep.
To tie into that a little bit from Sharon, are customer expectations moving targets? Will they always expect more after a great customer experience?
Yeah, and so that's one of our core values is deliver wow through service, and what wows a customer definitely has changed over the last 13 years. 13 years ago, we offered free shipping both ways, but even offering free shipping one way was this amazing thing 13 years ago, and now it's expected in a lot of cases. So we're always trying to think of how do you raise the bar and change expectations.
Okay. Linda was looking to see if there was a website that she could learn more about the Downtown Las Vegas project and events, and it looks like
Yep, downtownproject.com.
Okay. And from Twitter user Reno Envy, what would a company present? How would a company present a small business idea for the downtown project?
So downtown, we're still refining the process, but there's if you just browse the downtownproject.com website, I think there's a form, and we've been asking people to submit videos, kind of like how Kickstarter has people submit videos, and so, but that's also an ongoing, evolving process. But I think it should explain everything on the website on how that works.
And that might also be an answer to this question from Wayne. Do you invest in small businesses or make loans? So that, of course, would be the downtown project that they're speaking
about. Yep, we invest, but we don't do loans.
Okay, from Twitter user Reno Envy, do you have plans to brand the Las Vegas Downtown Project?
I mean, for the most part, we kind of want to be invisible in the background, and really, I think the important thing to brand is just downtown Vegas in general, and having people understand that downtown Vegas is nothing like the Strip, and you know, the Strip is built for tourists and kind of this transient mentality, and we're really focused on the opposite. We're focused on locals and community.
So it's for the community as a whole, not as per se for a branding type of situation, for any publicity of any particular company.
Yeah,
it's just for
we
the,
just
the
want people
community as a whole.
to use the word downtown more often.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Tony. Final question from Casey. With the state of the economy, unemployment in Nevada, and the upcoming election, what encourages you for Las Vegas holistically?
I think it's just, even in the past year, you know, we actually just yesterday moved about 200 Zappos employees to a temporary building on Carson Street, which is a few blocks from City Hall, and our actual move isn't till next year, but it's been pretty exciting just even in the past year, even though we haven't really moved yet, just seeing the change in energy and more people wanting to come back. And I think the most telling is people that come and visit, they come back again 2 or 3 months later and want to not only see what's happened, but they actually want to contribute and teach classes and so on. So I think there's just, I think, an energy and optimism that wasn't really there before.
All right. Well, Tony, thank you so much. I wanted to thank you
Thank
for
you.
taking your time out of your very busy schedule. We know how busy you are with so much going on today, and I do want to let everyone know that you can certainly see a rebroadcast of this, including Tony's slides as well, at the website nevadasmallbusiness.com. And with that, I'd like to go ahead and again thank everybody for attending, and please have a wonderful rest of the day from Nevada State Bank. Take care.